Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I'm joined, as I'm always joined, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going great.
What we have for you today is not a news episode of the show.
That's right.
We're taking a week off of news episode of the show, but we have something else instead.
That's right. So we have a Patreon, and over on our Patreon, if you're supporting us at the 8 or 16-bit level, you get access to once-a-month episodes of mini-series that we're doing. For the past 6 months, we've been doing a mini-series called NCS Arcade.
Yes, and we are proud of this mini. Not that we're not proud of the other mini-series, we're proud of them too, but this one feels very much like in the wheelhouse of what the show does and what Mark and I are interested in and very practiced at talking about. So we thought we would share a little bit of one of these episodes with everyone.
That's right. So NCS Arcade is a mini-series where Patrick and I played games that are available on Nintendo Switch Online and Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack that we've never beaten before. And the first one that we did way back in January was The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap for the Game Boy Advance.
Right. So what you're about to hear is a chunk of that conversation. And if that conversation sounds like fun to you and you want to check out more of it, you can go check us out on Patreon at the 8 or 16-bit levels, and then you have access to the full catalog. There are 6 episodes like this about games, and then another like dozen episodes about musicals and detective shows. Thank you. So without further ado, here is part of our conversation about The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. Should we start here with just our experiences with the Minish Cap in general, like when it came out and now?
Yeah, so The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap is a Game Boy Advance game that released in 2004 or 2005, depending on where you lived in the world at the time.
In North America, 2005, January.
And so I definitely owned a Game Boy Advance, but I did not play this game when it first came out, and then maybe like in 2008 2009ish I rented it from GameFly because I had a GameFly subscription at the time, because I was getting mostly for like PlayStation 3 games. I was getting a ton of PlayStation 3 games, but they also had DS and Game Boy Advance games at the time, and so I rented Minish Cap from that and played a little bit of it. I want to say maybe like an hour or two, and could never really get in. I couldn't get into it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's I feel like that's got to be a common story, because I think the end of this game is way stronger than the beginning. I don't know if you find that to be true.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess. Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
Okay. But so you had like you'd rented it, couldn't really get into it.
And for the longest time I was like, do I just not really like the Capcom developed and published Zelda games?
Right. Well, because to that point, had you been playing the Oracle games at all, or is that just only like a conclusion that you came to later after playing a little bit of Oracle of Seasons,
so
whichever one we played with Connor?
Right. Yeah, ages. Yeah. At some point in my life, I had played whichever one we didn't play with Connor. So I want to say Seasons. And then Ages was new to me, but I didn't really like Seasons that much. I found both, like when we played, I'm just committing to Ages at this point, with Connor for his show, Connor McCabe, and who is maybe listening to this.
Hey, Connor. You should listen to the episode. It's the Super NPC like book club. The Zelda season is available for free to listen to. So it's you, me, Connor, and Vic Michaelis talking about, we think, Oracle of Season or Ages. Ages. It's hard because I played whichever one was the wrong one for like 6 hours.
That's
right. And then was like, I played the wrong one, and
that's right.
Played the other one.
But so whichever one we didn't play for the book club, I played the other one before, and I didn't really like it. I didn't like Ages either. Like, I find them to be really kind of like tedious games.
Yeah.
But I feel like they have a strong reputation. Like, I think generally speaking, people really like those games. And I think that's true of the people who have played Minish Cap.
That they really like this game as well.
Yeah,
Okay, that is interesting. But that's your experience of playing the game in like the early 2000s. Uh, and then have you had like any chance to like try to revisit it in the years since, or?
No, I haven't tried to revisit it at all in the
Yeah.
year since. So it wasn't until it came to Nintendo Switch Online and that this like miniseries happened.
Yeah.
It was like, oh cool, now's like actually an opportunity for me to sit
Right.
down and play this game.
And not just an opportunity, but also like a little fire under your feet.
Yeah,
to
a
be like-
mandate.
right? Yeah, exactly. you have to play this game.
Yeah.
So my experience with the Minish Cap when it first came out in 2005, that's when I'm sort of in my like gaming funk where I'm not really playing games that much, and I'm definitely not playing Nintendo games that much. Like I had I like co-owned an Xbox with my roommate one summer, and like that was kind of it. Like for the most part, I was like laying low. GameCube games, like I didn't really play a bunch of those until later, and I played most of them on Wii. And both the Wii and the DS, especially the DS Lite, got me back into gaming. But this is just like my college time where I was like making a lot of music and like going to a lot of school and drinking a lot. So I just wasn't playing games as much. So I missed this when it came out. But then 2 years after it came out, February of 2007, I order a copy of it on Amazon. I'm looking at my order right now, February 15th, 2007. I ordered a copy for the Game Boy Advance, had it delivered to me, played it a little bit, couldn't get into it. I had my original Game Boy Advance, which like by 2007 was really starting to like show its age, right? And maybe I was also trying to play it on my DS. That's probable, right? But just for whatever reason, couldn't get into it. And put it away. It's been I've been like happy to have that cart in my collection, and have kind of like started it a couple times, but never really being able to get into it. When we announced that we were going to be doing this game as part of NCS Arcade, Connor McCabe had asked like, hey, can I borrow how are you going to play it? And I was like, oh, I'm going to use NSO, right? It's part of the premise of the show, first of all, and second of all, I want that rewind. I don't want to. I don't want to be. I don't want to be dying and starting a dungeon.
Like fall down a hole in a dungeon, I don't want to try to find my way
not
back.
Done that. Yes, exactly. So I lent Connor the cart. And I get a text from him a couple days later where he's like, the pins need to be clean. Like it's my his GBA wasn't like reading it, and so like he cleaned the pins, took it apart, and then was like, hey, how much important is it to you that you have like a legitimate copy of this game, and like how devastated would you be to find out that like this is probably a pirated copy of Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap? And I was like, I guess I've got I bought it, third hand, like through an Amazon supplier, and he was like, I think it's pirated. I think this is a fake version of Minish Cap.
That's amazing.
What's amazing is I bought it in February of 2007. The game had been out for 2 years. 2 years, that's it. And already there are pirated copies on Amazon.
Yeah, wow.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild. And after all this time, you finally learned the truth.
Yeah.
You should dispute that sale.
I should. I'm looking at it now. It says the return window closed on March 18th, 2007. So
missed it by
I feel
a
like it
few
would be
years.
tough.
Yeah.
I did click back through like that seller, and there are a bunch of like, this is a fake version of the game. And like the game itself is on the cart, but like, it's just it's pirated. That's
right.
all. But so Minish Cap is a game that I did try to get into a couple months ago, and had beaten the first 2 dungeons, and then just kind of lost track of it. And part of that is like I discovered Pikmin, and then it was all over. But so yeah, it really wasn't until late last year that I was like, all right, giving Minish Cap an honest try, and obviously hadn't beaten it until last night actually, and so that's my experience with the Minish Cap.
So let's talk about the origins of this game.
Yes, because you've already alluded to the fact that this is a Capcom produced Zelda game, not their first, in fact, their last, right?
Yeah, because they did four. There was the Ages and Seasons games for the Game Boy Color,
That's correct.
and those were released simultaneously, which is pretty nuts when you think about it.
Yes. Well, and there was a planned third game, Oracle of Secrets, which would revolve around the last of the three like Hylian goddesses, and that one was like scrapped, and they just ended up releasing this duology that came out together.
And then, as part of the Link to the Past Game Boy Advance release, which is how I first beat Link to the Past, there was also this like multiplayer kind of side story called Four Swords. And Four Swords,
yes,
it introduces this mechanic that is featured in Minish Cap, which I didn't realize was part of it, but makes sense. It introduces Vati, who's the villain of Minish Cap, and also this like puzzle mechanic. Well, in Minish Cap, it's a puzzle mechanic, but in Four Swords, it is just like how the game is played.
There are just four of you.
There
right?
are four links running around solving puzzles together. Not that, I mean, like, Triforce Heroes always felt to me like a play on Four Swords and Four Swords Adventures.
Yes.
So, and then...
But with 3 instead of 4.
So 3 instead of 4, and then Minish Cap came after that, and Minish Cap was the final, like, collaboration between Nintendo and Capcom on creating Zelda games.
Yeah, well, and it's just it's such an interesting, like, its position in the franchise and its position in, like, the relationship between Capcom and Nintendo is very interesting, and also just like tracking it along Hidemaru Fujibayashi's career is like kind of bewildering, because Fujibayashi directs the Oracle games and Four Swords and this game, right? And so you're like, okay, so he's kind of like Nintendo's guy at Capcom who's like making these Zelda games happen, but in the modern era, he directed Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. He is Zelda.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when because he also directed Phantom Hourglass.
That's right.
So it feels like shortly after this game, Minish Cap, he must have come over to Nintendo and joined like Nintendo's team full time.
Well, it's hard to say like how exact, because like Nintendo does this with whenever they are working on like outside partners, where like Sora Limited, Masahiro Sakurai's company, doesn't really have like staff. Like he is Nintendo's guy at Bandai Namco when they're making Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, but like he's technically not like he's Nintendo's guy, but he's not Nintendo. He's Sora. Right. So like, I wonder how much like Fujibayashi, like, was he sort of Nintendo's guy there, or did he actually move over? Did they hire him away after like he was working at Capcom? Like, what exactly that trajectory is?
I feel like they must have, because he's definitely 100% full-time Nintendo staff now.
100%.
And so my guess is that he just made that transition back then, because now he's, in my mind, like Aonuma.
Yes.
Eiji Aonuma is the overall producer of the Zelda series, but I think that Aonuma is becoming more like Miyamoto is for the Mario series, where there's this live action Zelda movie in development. There have been rumors for years, well-sourced rumors for years, that something Zelda theme park with Universal is in the works. Just like last week, Universal released a kind of like, it was like a recruitment video for Universal theme park team members, but they were showing footage, like construction footage of their new theme park in Orlando called Epic Universe. And in one of the clips, you see Aonuma with Miyamoto on the construction site. There's no rumors that we pretty much, even though it hasn't been officially announced, we pretty much know what's coming to Epic Universe, and Zelda isn't part of that.
Yeah.
But then they went back and they edited that tiny bit out when people caught that he was there. So basically, I think that Aonuma is becoming more like, the like really like high level series producer.
Yeah.
And that Fujibayashi,
in some ways, like the brand manager,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. And Fujibayashi is already such a large part of the games, and that I just expect that to be his role even more and more continuing.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right. Yeah, well, and like when you think about that he's been at the head of the Zelda games since the Oracle games, so since like 1999 or something, or 2000, when exactly those games come out. I think it's 2000. But he's been sitting on that throne for a long time, and it just like gets more and more. Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. He's just like he's on the Mount Rushmore of like Zelda creators, right?
I also think it's really interesting to look at, and I don't know how much of this is my headcanon or how much of this is true, but I feel like after playing Minish Cap, I see its fingerprints all over Skyward Sword and even Breath of the Wild.
Yes.
Like those like newer games. One thing that I didn't realize, but
I guess I see it more in Skyward Sword. I'll need some convincing on Breath of the Wild, but Skyward Sword is so Minish Cappy.
I completely agree. I guess really the connection, I think, in Breath of the Wild doesn't really exist anymore, but we know for a fact, based on like the some of the behind the scenes like books that came out and interviews with Fujibayashi, that the Minish were late into Breath of the Wild's development, a group of people that lived in Hyrule that Link could like shrink down and interact with them.
That would be so cool in the context of Breath of the Wild. In the way that like I think the shrinking is ultimately not super fun in Minish Cap.
I agree with you.
That it could be very cool in a Breath of the Wild like game.
And
where you're actually shrinking in scale, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I was watching a YouTube video that talked about this a little bit, and their speculation was, I can't remember what it's called, but there's a region in Hyrule. It's where there's like that spiral out in the sea, that there isn't a group of people that live there. It's just empty.
Yeah.
And the speculation is that that's where the Minish would have been like based.
Interesting.
But yeah, like even according to Fujibayashi, like they were very late into development. It was a late decision to remove the Minish from Breath of the Wild. And so I guess that's where so to me it feels like Fuji, even though in the game, in Breath of the Wild itself, I agree with you, there's not really a ton of like connections in the way that I feel like Skyward Sword there very much is. This Minish Cap feels like a game that at least Fujibayashi has a lot of fondness for, because like wanting to return to that in Breath of the Wild and having that, it ultimately didn't make the cut. But.
Right. Well, and like there certainly are things worth that I think would be worth revisiting in the future of the series. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it is just sort of like memory hold into this, like, because like Vati doesn't show up again. Eslo, the hat that like chews you out. Like we get like riffs on that later, but like it's not him,
Yep.
So like and there's like a handful of items that are unique to this game that like we don't really see again, because it would be weird to see Link rocks caping around, just flying around like Superman. But yeah, it does in some ways feel like not a dead end, but just like its evolutionary line is bizarre to me, because it's placed in the timeline, like in the official Zelda timeline, which believe or care about that as much as you want, after Skyward Sword and before Four Swords. So it's like part of the like foundational myth of the Hyrule that you play in like Ocarina, and therefore everything that branches off of that. But it is also presented sort of in the Toon Link style. Can we talk about the art style? And like, because in some ways, like all of the cover art for the game and all the promotional art, and when you see like there are some really nice like pixel portraits that you encounter throughout the game, everyone is done up in the Wind Waker style, right? But like the other games that do that like Toon Link aesthetic are like the sequels to Wind Waker.
Right, Phantom Hourglass and
Spirit Tracks.
Spirit Tracks.
But this one game, Minish Cap, like takes place in a totally separate. Do you know what I'm like
Yeah,
driving at here?
and I think maybe it's just like a product of when it was developed and released, because
Yes.
Wind Waker came out in 2003.
Mhm.
This came out in 2004/5. So they must have been there was overlap in development between these games,
Yeah,
or at
yes.
least right. And like
Mhm.
Twilight Princess, what would become
The dark one.
Well, like
Yeah.
what would become like, I mean, Twilight Princess is its own weird
Yes.
like art style thing going on. But in the period where this game was in development, Toon Link was just Link.
That's a great point. That is although it is closer to the release of Twilight Princess than it is to the release of Wind Waker.
Is it?
Yeah, Twilight Princess is less than 2 years after. So Minish Cap comes out in January of 2005, and then Twilight Princess is out by the end of 2007.
Weird.
Yeah. So like it's really it is weird to like yes, it is a sequel to Wind Waker, obviously, or at least like it uses the Wind Waker aesthetics. It is not a story sequel to it, but it is kind of like an aesthetic sequel to it, even though where the series is going to be driving to is something way different.
Yeah.
Although maybe not on the handheld side, right? Because then we get Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks,
and Triforce Heroes, which also has like the Toon Link sort of thing.
Well,
going
kind
for
of.
it.
Triforce Heroes has more the Link Between Worlds aesthetic to it.
Oh, you're right.
Which is similar but different. But also not, though, because the art style, like the in-game art style of Minish Cap, kind of looks more like Link to the Past to me.
I agree. Yeah, I think it's definitely splitting the difference.
Yes.
Because, like the Game Boy Advance is like a 32-bit system or something like that.
Sure.
And so it does more than the Super Nintendo was capable of. So graphically, I think Minish Cap is a good-looking game.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I like the aesthetics of Minish Cap a lot.
Okay, but so that's is there any other like just context about where this game like comes from, or like the forge in which it was made that you want to comment on? I had one other observation was that this is the only of the Capcom Zelda games that KJ Inafune is listed as a producer on. Obviously, one of like the big wigs over at Capcom, and so it's just kind of
at the time.
Yes.
Like he's like the father of Mega Man. Is that?
Yeah, yes, yeah, and like his fingerprints are like all over Capcom's like first 2 decades of game development.
Oh wait, he was the director of Dead Rising, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then also like had a hand in this game, but
Yeah.
not in like the Oracle games. For example.
Yeah, that's so interesting. He is not. Ever since he left Capcom and the whole mess with what was his Mega Man?
Mighty Number 9.
Mighty Number 9, like that whole mess. He has not been very prominent in gaming news, I feel like.
Yeah.
But during this era, and especially like the PS3 era, he was very, very prominent because he was a very outspoken critic of Japanese game development. And his feelings were that this has nothing to do with Minish Cap, but just kind of like that. It just sparked my memory of this person, and it's like, oh right. And then so he eventually like left Capcom, did his own thing, and has just kind of I don't know what he's up to now.
But I mean, like, just looking at his early work with Capcom, Street Fighter, Mega Man 2, DuckTales, Chippendale, Mega Man 3, Mega Man 4, Mega Man 5, Breath of Fire, Mega Man 6, Mega Man X. Like, the dude was just, when you think about what made Capcom special in the 90s, it's Inafune. And I'm sure a bunch of other people who were working really hard. I mean, to downplay the accomplishments of people I've never known or done any research on. But okay, so that's where Minish Cap comes from.
Yeah. So how do we want to approach this? Like, do we have here like a high level plot synopsis? It's hard to know how much to care about the plot.
Yes.
But it does feature a main villain that is not Ganon or Ganondorf.
Yeah, so maybe we have pulled this plot summary from Wikipedia. Oh, by the way, we're spoiling the game. I mean, this is a full discussion of Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, which means
because we've beaten it, so
we've
we know,
beaten
so
it.
we can talk about.
We
the
know how it
ending.
ends.
Yeah,
I saw it last night. So do we want to just like it's a 4-paragraph summary here. Do you want to just like read a paragraph, talk about it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Let's do that.
I'll read the first paragraph.
Okay.
Centuries ago, Hyrule was ravaged by evil forces until the Picori, a race of tiny creatures, bestowed a young hero with the Picori blade and the Light Force, using both to trap the world's evils in a chest. The grateful people of Hyrule would hold an annual Picori festival with legends stating that the door between their worlds would open every 100 years, allowing the Picori to return. And this is all covered in like the pre-game like cutscene stuff.
One thing first of all, I've been reading it, and I am not saying one is right or wrong. It was just interesting to me to hear you say Picori, because I've been saying Picori in my mind.
Oh,
so it's just interesting to have it like read out loud by somebody else and be like, "Oh yeah, I've never heard this word spoken."
Yeah.
It could be anything.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a made-up word.
Yeah.
So.
Also, it's not right, and that's a level of like that's not actually what they're called,
right.
Which is a level of or what they call themselves. It's like a level of abstraction that I think is really funny. Is in this game because it feels overly
like why do
like,
that?
Why do that? Where it's like, oh, like the Hyruleans call them Picori, but
really we're the Minish.
We're the Minish.
But also like the Picori or Picori or whatever sound more like it sounds more like a scientific term. Like the Minish is like the cute little thing that like the ground. There's a little Minish guy in
No, it's true. It's very true.
And so as this information is being doled out to you in the opening cutscene of the game, it's all presented in this like these like pixelated portraits, like I was saying, but in a like stained glass kind of style, which is cool. I like that, and then that'll come back like towards the end of the game that you get some in-game like lore download in the form of a stained glass window, which is cool.
It is cool.
I think that that planting that early as like our storytelling aesthetic and then getting it in-game is a neat little bit of narrative trickery.
In the present, Link accompanies Princess Zelda to the Picori Festival, which again happens like every 100 years. So I'll just finish reading it and then we can talk about
it.
Yes. The festival's sword fighting champion, Vadi, destroys the Picori blade and opens the chest, releasing monsters across Hyrule. Not finding the life force he seeks, Vadi turns Zelda into stone and leaves. As only children can see the Picori, King Daltus orders Link to find them so that the sword can be reforged to stop Vati and restore Zelda. Traveling to Minish Woods, Link encounters Eslo, a magical hat, who decides to accompany Link and grants him the ability to shrink to Picori size. The Picori, who call themselves Minish, hey, if they're calling themselves Minish,
we should just call them Minish. Yes.
Then task Link with retrieving the 4 elements, magic stones needed to restore the Picori blade.
So, but they still call the blade the Picori blade, and not the Minish.
Maybe that's where the confusion originated.
Okay, so we have brought up now Eslo, right? He is he's our Navi in this. He's our Midna in this. Probably more similar to Midna, right? Because he also kind of gives you a hard time.
I feel yes. Yeah. I want to talk about Eslo first. Real small thing.
Yes.
From the beginning of this. So Link accompanies Princess Zelda to the Picori Festival. And the reason he does this is because Link's like uncle or guardian, whatever it is friends or was friends with the king, and so that's why they have this like familial connection. But that was something that reminded me in a small way of Skyward Sword and the beginning of A Link to the Past. Like I feel like there's a lot of Link, not that there's no obvious like relationship between like
but his king, uncle is
but the uncle and like being sent by I don't know. I feel like this game to me feels like kind of a best of Zelda up to this point
Sure.
in a lot of ways.
Almost a sum of Zelda up to this point. I don't know that's always best of.
Yes.
But I thought you were going to say, and this would be like evidence in your like you can see some of it in Breath of the Wild, that like there is an existing relationship between Link and Zelda in Breath of the Wild, right? That's part of their backstory, just as there is in this game. That's not really common among the rest of the Zelda games, where like you encounter her or like she's asleep. Right?
Right. But no, that's why you're totally right. That's a connection that I missed with Skyward Sword, because that is a huge foundational part of the story of Skyward Sword, is that like relationship that is very unique.
Yes.
But now that we're like going through this, not that unique in Fujibayashi Zelda games.
Right. Although like Zelda does not play an active role in Minish Cap.
Right.
She's turned to stone pretty early, and then the goal is unstone Zelda. Shall we continue down the?
Let's talk about Eslo.
Okay,
I interrupted you.
Right. Well, let's talk about Eslo, and actually, first let's talk about the this little like sword fighting thing that that happens. It like the game actually like tees you up for like a gameplay segment of like you're gonna fight Eslo, and then not Eslo, Vati, and he just mops the floor with you.
Yep.
Which is cute.
And I also this festival segment reminded me of the beginning of Chrono Trigger.
How could it not?
Yeah. And you're, because you can like talk to the different people who have booths. They're in like, it's like Hyrule Town. What is the name of the place the central area?
Yeah, I think it's just the Hyrule Town, right?
Yeah, but it's like, it has that same feel as like Chrono Trigger, because those people except you return to this area multiple times.
Many
times,
the
people that you're introduced to, like they are the shopkeepers and all that kind of stuff. It's just it's a fun. I like this intro. I think it's a fun introduction to the world.
I do. I think it's cute. I think it does start to like one of the things about the Hyrule Town in this game is that it is very like sort of Clock Town-esque from the Majora's Mask, in that like there are just a bunch of little stories happening in there, and like you can run those little quests to completion. Not at any point. The game is sort of weird about when it like adds new stuff to do in the town, or at least I found it to be like a little bit frustrating that like there wouldn't always be a queue, that like there's something new to do in town.
No, totally.
But that it is a bigger, it is like a genuine hub for like a thing you need to revisit and like tend to over and over and over again. Okay, so that's Vati a little bit. That's the meeting the townspeople at the festival. Eslo, he's a hat.
He's a hat
and kind of a bird.
He's a Minish who got turned. Well, I guess the next paragraph will explain a little bit more about it. But yeah, like so, I feel like Eslo is in the grand tradition of Zelda side characters who I feel like all the complaints about Fi from Skyward Sword are true of Eslo as well. Like you walk into an area and Eslo's like, yeah, like, boy, that lava sure looks hot. Better not fall into it. And you're like, yeah, I've played a video game before. Like I know I don't need, right? Like,
which is a criticism that I agree with, but I'm also like, Eslo, you could have helped me out with so many things in this game. Like this, Zelda games loop back on themselves all the time, and like they are meant for you to like get lost in and explore. But I get lost in Minish Cap more than I get lost in a normal Zelda game.
That's interesting. Do you mean like just in the overworld or in
the overworld? And the dungeons I feel like are, and not to like jump too far ahead into like our gameplay experience, I think the dungeons in this game are actually like quite good. But when I am playing the game on the open world between the dungeons, I have a walkthrough like sitting up next to me because I just like I don't think the game is great about signposting like where to go next, how to get what you need next to access the next dungeon. And as soon as I get into a dungeon, I'm like, great, flip my phone over and I'll just experience the dungeon as it comes. They feel like more like linear or obvious or something to me in a way that makes them tackleable in the way that I don't feel the overworld is.
Yeah, I felt like with the overworld, sometimes because I ran into the same issue a lot, and I feel like sometimes when I figured out where to go, it was like right back where I was before, as in like the game intended for it to be easy to find. And
Right.
yet, for
And yet it
whatever
wasn't.
reason,
Yeah.
and maybe it's because my recall for, and this also affects my experience with 2D Zelda dungeons in general. My spatial recall within video games is not great. So I am not like making a mental map in my head as I'm going through something. Like it's one of the reasons why I don't really enjoy very many Metroidvania games unless it has like a good map function or something like that, because I hate this feeling of just like I've wandered this world forever. I have no idea where I'm going, or I remember where I'm supposed to go, but I can't figure out the path
Right.
I'm supposed to take to
Right.
get there.
You're like, it was just that one room, and it's like over here, there's like a red guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I felt like there were times in in playing Minish Cap where I ran into that problem where it's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to go there, but then the way that I'm supposed to do that like the way that I advance the game turns out to be really esoteric.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
some of
I
it is
agree with
like,
that.
oh, I just maybe when I hit these walls, I need to go back to Hyrule Town more and just poke around.
Right.
But some of it, I felt like it was, like
It can be pretty
full
obtuse.
point and click
Yes.
adventure-y. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's just me, but I don't know how anybody was supposed to figure out like that this was the next logical step.
You said something there, which you said that when you hit those walls, that you're like, I should go back to Hyrule Town. And I was thinking a lot about like, when you're playing a game that like it's fun to try to identify what the verb is of the game. Is it like fight? Is it explore? And I think the verb of Minish Cap is go back. Like, I think if you're instructing someone like how to get through this game and be like, okay, go back to this point, uh, shrink down and then go back to this thing that you were, like there's just so many times of like revisiting and re-exploring the same spaces that like go back to me feels like the verb of Minish Cap.
But you're right that the dungeons are not like that.
The dungeons are not like that.
I feel like like you said, we'll get into it more, but yeah, the overworld, like some of the traversal of the overworld, it drove me a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I'll agree. Should I keep reading the plot here?
Yeah. Do we want to talk about the only thing is do we want to talk about Vadi before we go on too much?
Sure. Yeah. So general impressions of Vadi. I don't actually think this character is that well characterized on the screen. He does not have like the sort of like Girahim mystique to him, or like Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom or whatever. I found him to be kind of a hollow villain. It's neat that he like looks different and is a different guy, but like I don't know. Were you able to take away any like real characterization from him? He giggles a lot.
And yeah, I don't feel like he's like super well realized either. Like the whole kind of like overarching plot of this game and the things that kick it into motion that we'll get into in the next like paragraph of the plot synopsis, I think are pretty silly. Like pretty weak.
Yeah. I agree with that. Should we jump into that next paragraph then? During the journey, Eslo explains that he was once a Minish sage who created the Mage's Cap, a hat capable of granting wishes. But his apprentice, Vati, stole the hat and became a powerful sorcerer. Fascinated by evil and seeking the light force's power, Vati used his new abilities to trap Eslo in his current form. Meanwhile, Vati brainwashes King Daltus and takes control of Hyrule Castle. Link eventually retrieves the 4 elements and infuses them into the reforged blade, which becomes the 4 sword. Link and Eslo also learn that the light force is passed down within Hyrule's princess. Vati, who had been spying on them, overhears this and begins siphoning the light force from Zelda.
Which I think is a kind of fun and interesting mechanic at the end of this game. Where there's like a literal ticking clock.
Which I didn't believe was a clock until it actually ran out on me. I thought it was just like advancing like screen by screen, being like, now there's 2 bells, and then I'm fighting these dark nuts for a while, and then it's like, oops, there's the last bell.
Yeah.
Zelda's gone.
I felt like This whole thing.
Is it magic hat that did it to you?
It's the magic. It's the wish granting hat.
Yeah.
That it's like, Eslo, what are you doing? In what world is this going to be used for good?
Yeah, I mean, Zelda does use it for good at the end of the game after you've beaten Vati. But yeah, it's interesting how much it's like playing with these sort of foundational ideas of Zelda. There's a mystical blade. There's a magic objects that grants wishes. But like it's not the Master Sword and it's not the Triforce. It's the Light Force is such a funny like I don't know. It's like the Triforce, but like it's just light.
It's just one thing.
It's just like in the princess. I don't know.
I did like. So one thing, honestly, that I liked about this game is how streamlined it is.
Totally.
Like, in A Link to the Past, you gather the pendants, and then a whole nother world opens up.
Yeah.
In Minish Cap, you get the 4 elements. You have the ability to be control 4 different like links at the same time, which I think is used to cool ends in multiple parts in this game. And
tedious ends both. I feel like it does both.
It does both. I feel like that's just true of Minish Cap
that's
in
a great
general.
point. That's a great point.
It is doing some of it is like that Capcom Zelda game tedium that I felt really strongly in Ages and Seasons, but I feel like this game has for me so much more that I enjoyed.
Yes. This is a better game than the Oracle games for sure.
But yeah, you collect those 4, and then you go to the final area.
Yeah,
and call it good.
There's one psych out where you do a dungeon and there isn't an element at the end of it.
Yep,
but that's it.
Yeah,
and it's the third one, and then it doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
it's like they just had 5 dungeons and we're like, I don't know, just put it in there. There's no prize at the end. Yeah. It's fine. Should we do this last paragraph?
Yeah,
here?
so
okay.
Link returns to the castle and confronts Vati, who uses the extracted light force to become all-powerful, but Link overcomes Vati and restores Zelda to normal. Vati transforms into a demonic form, totally Kirby and boss here.
Yeah, true.
Only to be vanquished by Link, restoring Eslo to normal. Zelda retrieves the mage's cap and uses it to undo all the damage done by Vati, destroying the cap in the process. Eslo thanks Link for his help, giving him a new hat as a parting gift, which is Link's,
signature
iconic
green hat. Yeah,
and departs through the door to the Minish realm as it seals itself for another century. So Eslo and the Minish could return at any time.
Well, at any time after 100 years or 200 years, right? It's only in 100-year increments.
Yeah, but luckily there's no dates on any of the Zelda games, so like,
that's a great point. Could be any time.
Almost showed up in Breath of the Wild.
Yep,
and could show up in a future Zelda game.
But like the Minish are just like around in Hyrule otherwise, right?
They must be, because we learn in this game that like Minish are responsible for rupees existing. And
yeah.
So when you're like when you're cutting bushes and in other Zelda games and you find rupees, that's because the Minish are responsible for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So okay, that's the story of the game.
Just to expand on that. So you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Minish are in every Zelda game.
Yes.
The Minish have always been
and
they
will
will always be in every Zelda game.
That's right. But you just don't interact with them in any but this game. So that's that.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
And if you want more, head on over to Patreon. We will be back on Thursday with a new episode, and next week with another news episode where we will, I'm sure, catch up on all the things that we've been playing over the last 2 weeks. But that is going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Oh geez, I don't have the notes up to remember exactly how the show ends. Geez,
Anthony DeLuca made our logo,
and
our theme music by 8-Bit Betty.
Here it is. For my co-host Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Eller saying thank you for listening.